Welcome to the Sports Card Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Big Ken. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on a streaming service, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. You'll be notified whenever I drop any new content. Welcome. Thanks for being here. How is everyone doing? Apologies for no episode on Monday, and also for those of you who came looking for me at the Card Vault show at Foxwoods and didn't see me. After 4 years, almost to the day when COVID started, I finally got it. It finally got me. Uh, I left more than the Mohegan Sun show with cards and cash, I think. I think that's where I must have picked it up the weekend before. But Wednesday, I started feeling sick. And by Thursday, I was in bed, took a test, tested positive. So that's where I stayed all weekend. You could probably still hear it in my voice. I'm a little, even now, I figured I'd be okay to do this. And now, like, I could feel my voice straining a little too. So, not going to be a long episode, but definitely needed to deliver after leaving you at no episode on Monday. Interestingly enough, I missed the Foxwoods show last year after I had already booked plane tickets to go down and see my daughter in North Carolina. They announced the show, so I ended up missing it, and I was super excited this year. I mean, everybody talked about the show last year. In the last episode, I was talking about I was going to be able to do a nice comparison between the two shows, having and what it would look like too, having two casino shows. I mean, these casinos in Connecticut are only 7.5 miles apart, right? So having two shows back to back, what it was going to look like, and maybe how different it was going to look too. But I've got zero. I've got nothing for you. I was on the couch all weekend, having a little FOMO. Appreciate Bill and Billy, Bill and his son Billy, who ended up taking the table for me on Saturday and not just leaving it empty up there. I appreciated them for that. But there was no way I could have made that show. Hopefully next year I'll be able to make this one. Hopefully this is not going to be a yearly one of those things that you just keep missing year after year. And not even always last minute stuff, right? So I have a ton of cards coming back from PSA. Now I talked about sending all these orders off to PSA, and now all of a sudden I've got packages showing up like crazy over here. Charges too, right? They're not coming back free. The interesting thing with PSA, you send all that stuff out, and when it's done, that's how you get the notification. Your credit card just got charged. That's how you know your grades are available. Versus like an SGC where they charge you everything up front and you send them off and you wait for them to come back. But either way, tons of cards coming back. For the most part, I've been pretty happy with the grades. It's I don't know how to put it. I don't even know. And I know people say, don't even try to figure it out. But I have a notebook here of notes. Like, I go through these cards, I look at these cards, and I see cards that are just a little bit off centered, either left to the right or top to bottom, or they have like a little mark on them, or there's a print line on it. And I'm making notes, and cards, I say, look, I'm going to take a chance on this card, and I'm going to send this one in. And then some I don't send in, and some have nothing. I just give like a green check. Like, this card is beautiful, top to bottom, left to right, no marks. I've checked everything. And it's so interesting when these cards come back and I see the grades and I go grab the notebook. I'm like, what is going on? Like, the cards that I'm like, oh, there's no way, this card had this, and that. And they come back at 10. And the cards with my green check marks and circle, that exclamation, like, this card is beautiful, right? Comes back a 9. One of them came back an 8. I'm like, I just almost feel like just cracking the card out of there, wiping it down, and sending it back with the next orders. I have no idea how this card came back an 8, or is there something I missed? Like, do I really need to, do something more with this card? before I send it. I have no idea. So it's so interesting. And then I start to wonder, well, these cards that I said will never gem and are coming back at 10, and the cards that I'm putting aside saying, well, I'm not going to send these in for grading because I'm afraid that it could be less than a 9. Like, I don't know if I should just be sending these cards in, just take a chance and say, you know what, it's anyone's guess what these cards are going to come back. And it just amazes me that, PSA is the leader, right? I mean, they fetch the most amount of money in grading on cards and I mean that in the case. Like, if you go out to a case and there's a SGC or a CSG or any of those other grading companies, all of a sudden, if you're looking at a comp, you're lowering the price on this. But if it's PSA, it's top of the line. But I don't know. It's interesting. I'm not knocking them because I'm getting back better grades than I mean, it's becoming profitable for me when these cards are coming back in and I send off. Like, one of the orders came back, it was $1,800 order, right? But then I go through my first 5 or 6 PSA 10s and they're $400, $500, $600 value on the cards. It's like, okay, at this point, everything else is gravy on top of it. So I mean, I can't complain on that end, and I wouldn't stop sending them there because I just think for right now, for what I'm doing, it makes the most sense. So they're going to keep getting my cards. I'm going to keep paying, and I'm, like everybody else, I guess, you're going to hope for the best. You do everything you can to hope that card is going to grade well, and keep your fingers crossed and be as surprised as I am on some cards, just shaking my head like, how did this card get a 10? But and then I don't know, sometimes, and I've said this before, sometimes I think they'll say, okay, so this guy's sending in this many cards, let's give him this many 10s. I don't care, you call it, whatever, just pick out 8, 10, or 12 of these cards, make them 10s, and 9 the rest, and call it a day. I mean, I know that's not what happens, but sometimes, like, when you think that in your head, it makes you feel better, when you're getting cards back that you expect to gem and they don't, and cards that you never thought were going to gem that they come back 10s. So, and one card I set off, it came back an 8.5. I never asked for a half grade. I've never gotten a half grade from PSA ever, and it was 116 cards in this order, and one card came back an 8.5. It was a soccer card, came back at 8.5. Like, I have no clue what happened with that, how anyone decided they were going to give it a half grade than just a whole. I have no idea what happened there. And there was no upcharge, there was no extra charge. They just decided they were going to make that an 8.5, and not an 8, not a 9, but an 8.5. So I'm happy not to be forced to sell the cards that I feel will grow in value. So here's, like, the important thing now. Sending these cards off, coming back, now I'm separating these cards into groups. When am I going to sell these cards, right? I have the for sale now pile, I have the hold until June, July pile, and I have the hold till the national pile, right? So this is kind of like my 3 pile separation. And when I'm sending these things out, I always make sure I have a variety in there of cards that I can sell now, that I can sell in a couple months, and I can sell in 4 or 5 months, type of thing, because it's no fun to get all these cards back and put them away and say, well, we're going to be holding these cards for 5 or 6 months, especially when, as a dealer, you want to be setting up every month, right? Or setting up as much as you can and have stuff in your case, have, product in your case that's for sale. So definitely have to send a variety in, so when they come back, it can make 3 piles uh, with these cards. And even though, I mean, we talk about it, I've talked about it, football is now year round. It feels we've hit that point with the comps where anything of decent value that had been in my case, maybe at the end of the football season, I'm pulling out because I just feel like now is not the time, especially higher end stuff. And any of the new stuff, the Prism, the Don Russ, any of that stuff that sent out for grading, and came back as 10s, it just seems senseless to try to sell that now, especially, like a CJ Stroud. Like, I know the prices are good right now, but I think the prices are going to be even better, could maybe even double to where they are now come, late spring, early summer. Even the nines, even a good amount that came back nines of the silvers, like a Prism silver, even a nine, I think that those cards will double in price. And I've gotten a bunch of messages from people that I know. Hey, did you get those orders back from PSA? I'm like, yeah. Well, you selling any Strouds, any Richardson? Like, they're asking me to sell and I understand. I mean, I'd be asking other people too. Hey, you selling those cards? Because now would be a great time to stockpile these cards and just hold them until the market is much better, right? Because I think the market is good, but it's just not great right now. And I think, I could be wrong. I could be absolutely wrong. I could be holding these cards, and the pop count could just be so insane come June that the values would be go down. People are just like putting on, the race to zero. I mean, that certainly could happen. And if it does, I'll be the first one to come on here and say, man, did I make a mistake? I should have moved all those cards back in, February or March when I got them back from PSA. But I really don't think so. So I'm going to be holding those for now. Last year I had a full table at the National, and I was able to sell both football and women's soccer and WNBA, and I had a good variety out there. But the most fun I think I had at the National was selling the women's stuff, the women's soccer, the WNBA stuff, and it was really hot. It was selling hot out there. There was only so many of us selling and putting stuff up on Instagram, and people re sharing posts and things like that. I just had a ton of people come looking for me, coming looking for the booth to buy to buy this stuff. I mean, the football sold really well, but I think if I would have moved it a week or 2 weeks before the national, I think I would have gotten the same prices on it. I didn't really see, like, I followed it last year and I talked about it. I didn't see a big jump in price. The percentages that I was up now, remember last year I was buying already graded cards. I was buying these cards graded and just holding them and waiting. So the percentages that I felt if I waited all the way to the national, I was going to get the best. And I found that waiting and selling them right there, that there was more competition. There was more people with the same cards where people would come and say, oh, that's the card on my list. What's the best you can do? Okay, I'm going to write down your table number. Maybe I'll be back. And they moved on. I mean, I ended up moving 90% of those cards out there. And, some I probably gave better deals on than others, but I don't think that it would have made much difference, and I may have done better if I sold them in Chantilly, 3 weeks or whatever that was, 4 weeks before the national, or another show I did in the beginning of July. Between June and July, I don't think the prices changed that much for me to not even put those cards out at that time and just hold them. So this year, I think I'm just going to break those cards out a little earlier, in June. I have some shows coming up, June. And I think with the football, I think I just might try to move that where people are really looking to buy those cards, pre-national, you know. And then when I get out there, I've done my job moving those cards. And when I get out there, I can sell what I want to sell out there. I could sell more of the women's stuff. Um, So that's kind of my plan. I mean, it's a plan and plans can change, right? But my plan this year is to, move football a few weeks before the national. and set up with mostly women's soccer and basketball. And I mean, if I have football left over, certainly bring that too. But I have a smaller space. Last year I had a full table. This year I don't. This year I have about two showcase spaces, and it's limited what I'm putting out there. So with a smaller space, you know, I'd rather be more unique out there and try to zig when everybody else is zagging, right? When most people, 90% of the people are selling football and basketball, and I guess you could add baseball in there too. That's still pretty popular at that time. Just do what I did last year. Just have something else out there and advertise the crap out of it and hope for the best. So where does that leave me rolling into the spring? I'll be selling mostly baseball, basketball, and pop culture. Two new lanes, for me, the basketball and the baseball. Um, I talked about these boxes and boxes of baseball from Topps and Bowman, the 2020 through 2022 that I've been going through, just finding cards, pulling out cards, and sending them off to grading. Nothing earth shattering, right? But just cards that make sense. That the prices on them now make sense to grade. So hopefully, in another month, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, that those, it may hopefully it'll make even more sense, and hopefully there'll be a few of those that really pop. So those guys that really pop. And I've been having a great time with the Bowman University stuff, the basketball stuff. I ripped a ton of it. I pulled a ton of cards I mean, I was completely set up for this weekend with so many things. And now, like I had my full table. In fact, the weekend before when I was at Mohegan, I did the show after that, and I said I really need to find more product for the following week because I had a show the next week, and I sold out the week before. Well, then in that week I had a bunch of orders come back from PSA. I had a bunch of stuff that I ordered, a wax that I opened up and separated, did all that, and then now it's all just sitting on my dining room table because it never got to move. It never made it to the show. So to be honest, besides the once a month show in New Britain, Connecticut, and a March Friday night show in Plainville, I only have a couple shows lined up between now and June. The only shows I've really booked, the next EC3 show at Mohegan Sun, and a new show that I booked, the Crown Jewel show in Rhode Island. Now, both are in June. EC3 is the beginning, the 8th, 9th. The Crown Jewels, the end of the month, 28th, 29th. I know Card Vault will have another upcoming show in May. I'm sure I'll do that. So at this point, I'll be looking for, possibly even at the end of this month and in April, looking for some shows to do. It's interesting that it feels that it never seems to align perfectly, right? You either book shows and you're low on inventory and you're scrambling, or you have no show and you've got a ton of inventory and you're like, all I want to do is set up, right? All I want to do is get a table somewhere and set up and start selling. So uh, feast or famine, right? Feast or famine. I've done a much better job, though. I think personally, I've done a much better job this year timing the PSA orders to the market. So the last couple of years, I've talked about, I sent these orders out. I'm waiting for them to come in. Hockey, by the time hockey showed up, the season was well underway and prices had risen and dropped already. Amongst other things, that I've sent out and I'm waited for stuff to come back. So this year I said, you know what? Everything I'm going to do early. It's okay. It's okay. I'll send it out. Make the baseball. I've gotten all the baseball back. I've already received a bunch of football back. I've got three more orders at PSA, and I've got one that I'm getting ready to send out. So last year I spent all that time, buying These graded cards now this year, I'm everything is raw. Everything I'm doing is raw, and I'm sending it out to grading, and I'm really pretty excited about, where my margins are gonna be on these cards that were raw to graded. And one thing I've learned, and, I'm sure everybody feels this way already, and everybody knows this, but if you don't, I'm gonna throw it out there on top anyways, is, a number of shows I went to, buying some raw cards, digging through boxes, pulling out some raw cards, some Justin Fields cards, things like that. I do the best I can at the show to go through them to say, "Hey, these cards, they look good enough," and then I negotiate, the price correctly that maybe the card doesn't look good and I can't send it in for grading. And most that come back have issues with them. I mean, I'm sure these are cards that have already been graded, right? And cracked back out. Um, but I have not been doing well at all buying raw cards at shows. I mean, just no good at all. Not one card came back. Um, Not one card gemmed. I think maybe one or two nines and a handful of eights that came back in cards. So definitely rethinking, how I'm purchasing raw cards versus ripping and acquiring. I'm afraid at this point to invest too much money into raw cards that I'm buying out of somebody else's case and somebody else's boxes because I guess either one, somebody's looked at them already and decided they're not gradable, or two, they've been graded and cracked them out and thrown them in a one touch or whatever and thrown them in things. So just buyer beware on that. Lighting is not that great at these shows. We all know that. And my old eyes don't see as well. I do the best I can with my phone and lights and things like that. But um buyer beware on that, when you're at the shows buying either out of cases or out of discount boxes on some raw cards that you think could have probably have a high pop count, and these cards could have probably been graded at one point. When I first started setting up, I used to see people running things so tight, just on top of everything they were doing, as a dealer. And I've talked about this many times, especially early on in season one. I talked about how much I admired certain people and how much I tried to emulate, what they were doing. And realistically, I really come to the conclusion that it just takes time, practice, some victories, a bunch of setbacks to fine tune everything that works just for you, and what works just for you is not going to work for somebody else. So a lot of times I would see what other people were doing and I would try to emulate it. I would try to do what they were doing, and I realized, man, I just couldn't. I'm not that person. I'm not that person who fine tune that to themselves. And people are asking me all the time, wow, looks this and looks that, and I try to tell people it works for me because these are my strengths, and my strengths are not your strengths. Your strengths are different and everybody else's strengths are different. So I always say, talking about what I'm doing and what works well for me, right? I'm really just playing to my strengths. I'm taking a lot of setbacks, right? A lot of L's that I took and learned from them, and I'm doing playing off my own strengths and figuring out what works for me. And I tell everybody, you have to figure that out for yourself, right? You can go out, and you've heard me on here. I've taken other people's strategies and I fine tune them to work for me. And I tell everybody else that's what you have to do. Even if you like exactly what I'm doing, take it and fine tune it to what's going to work for you. I don't care who you are, like, and with anything, whether it's this hobby or life, you got to take L's to start creating W's, right? I always use the expression in sports when I was coaching. I used to say, you have to lose to win. and I firmly believe that today. If you go out and you win and do something perfect the first time, God bless you, but I don't think most people can do that. I think, it takes a lot of fine tuning. It takes some setbacks, some losses, to really put together, something that, put together a winner anyways. Um, this weekend, there is a Saturday show at Mount Kisco, New York. It's funny here in the Northeast. We have all these shows, right? And some weekends there's like 5 shows, and people mess with me. What show are you going to? You're going north, south, east, west, right? And then this weekend, it's the one of those funny weekends that you see on Facebook and Instagram. People are like, "Where are the shows this weekend? Who's going to shows this weekend?" They're like, "Well, there's one show like north of Boston, and that's it." Right? There's like no other show going on. I mean, I think New Jersey always has a show every weekend. There's probably a show somewhere in New Jersey. But for me, the closest show is the Mount Kisco show. So that's where I will be Saturday. I'm going to head down there early. If you're out and about, if you're there, look for me. I'll be there. And you can hear I'm struggling a little, but I'm hoping that I'll be feeling 100% by Saturday as well. But either way, I will be back with a brand new episode on Sunday. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And if you like what you hear, please definitely subscribe. And most importantly, tell a friend and spread the word. Until next time, take care of yourselves and everyone around you.